Okay, everyone. Today, my interview is with our experienced professional, April, and she's going to answer some questions for us and then share some of her experiences. So, the first question I have for her is, when did you begin to learn the importance of protecting yourself?
I was probably in my early 20s and I was working at a pawn shop. We would get a lot of somewhat sketchy customers in there, some of who would even bring guns in to sell or pawn. And that's when I sort of got myself familiar with firearms and understood the importance of self protection.
Okay, what were your initial thoughts the first time you shot a gun?
Well, the first time I shot a gun, I was about 11, and my dad helped me shoot a 50 caliber muzzle loader. So I was pretty young at that point, but it wasn't until again like in my early 20s when I really started going to the range and practicing. I felt empowered by it, actually.
Thank you, April. What is the number one reflex that you notice an untrained person will have in a crisis, and how would you advise them to change this?
I would think the just this safely operating a firearm would be the hardest thing for somebody in a crisis if they weren't trained. Things like keeping your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot the gun, keeping it pointed in a safe direction as to not harm yourself or others. Um, Keep your eye on the target until you're ready to shoot. And even after you shoot, you should follow through with that.
Okay, thank you. What is the number one reflex that a person would have who is coming from a place of experience and who has educated themselves in calming themselves the best they can first? What's the number one reflex that that person is going to have when they're coming from a place of experience in a crisis situation with a gun?
Yeah, again, the overall operation of the gun, being familiar with that. If you're not, you would be fumbling around, sort of, that would create panic in your mind. If you're very familiar with it and you know exactly what you need to do, you would be a lot calmer and more apt to uh, hit your target.
Okay, cool. Now this question: you're in a mall, and there's an attack. What is your instinct at first, and then please explain what you would do next.
My first instinct would be to protect myself and my family or my loved ones, friends, or whoever might be with me. I don't know, you never know until you're in that situation what exactly you would do. I think I would be concerned about getting my loved ones out safely. I would like to think I would try to be the hero and, stop the shooter or the incident from happening. But I think first and foremost, I would be most interested in protecting my loved ones.
Okay. If you feel fear coming up that is causing you to freeze, what do you tell yourself in that situation?
That would be a situation where you would definitely want to get your mind right. I would just remind myself to stay calm. If you do panic and freak out, it's likely that the situation isn't going to go very well. So it's as I was telling you earlier, it's something I do when I ride horses, particularly one that is not that well trained and not very stable. So if you're in a situation that you're frightened of, the only thing you have control of is yourself and your mind. So again, if you can't get that under control, things are likely to not go very well. So in a situation like that, you just tell yourself, the only thing I have control over is myself. And when I do that, that's sort of like a positive self-talk. So that helps me keep focused, and it helps me to continue to do the things I need to do to achieve the uh, outcome.
And by the way, I want to mention that April is a really good teacher about as far as teaching you how to calm yourself down, how to do deep breathing before, and relax yourself with learning how to handle a gun and teaching you the importance of that. My next question is, you're at home and an attacker comes into your house and you're there with your loved one. Please try to give us an explanation of what your first reaction would be, and then could you explain as best you can to what you would do to carry through protecting yourself with your gun, or if you could not get it, what you would do next.
Okay, well, we sort of have a plan for something like that. We've strategically placed firearms throughout the house. So if you were in one room, you could gain access to that. I would definitely go for that first. If someone were breaking in the house, I would absolutely want to obtain my pistol or rifle. If that were not available, I would go for, we keep fire extinguishers next to our doors, so they can serve as a self-defense weapon. So you can, if you spray somebody in the face with a fire extinguisher, they're going to be temporarily blinded. And so then it's a pretty heavy object. You can whack them out with it, you know, while they're not able to see. And as a matter of fact, we did a program up at school where we got fire extinguishers placed in every classroom right next to the doors as a way for the teachers to have something to fight back with. So
that's good to know about the schools.
Yeah.
Okay, April. Now we would like to ask you if you could tell us a story of a situation you were in where you faced a crisis with a gun.
Yeah. Actually, here at home, I was home alone. This was maybe a couple years back. I was home alone when two strangers knocked on my front door. I opened the door, and they were a little scary looking, you know, but I try not to judge people by their looks, you know. So they had proceeded to tell me that their car broke down out the road, and they wanted to know if I could help them. So being a good neighbor and a friendly kind of person, I thought, you know, gosh, I should help these guys out, you know, I could go pull them out. So as I thought about it for a few more seconds, I grabbed my pistol and I put it in my front coat pocket. I went outside, and when the one guy was already getting into the back of my Jeep, the other guy had thrown a big chain that I was going to pull him out with on the floorboard of my Jeep. And at that point, I felt sick to my stomach. I just had a really bad feeling that, you know, that feeling you get that something's just definitely not right here. And so I jumped out of the car and I said to them, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go call my neighbor, Dan. He's got a big truck, and I think he'd be better at pulling your car out, you know. So I come into the house, and at this point, the adrenaline's going. I'm feeling in fear, you know. And so I called Dan on the phone, and I tell him what's going on, and I ask him to come over. As I go back outside, again, I have my pistol in my front pocket, and I've got my finger on the trigger. And so I approach the guy who's now sitting on the front of my Jeep, and he stands up and he steps into my personal space, where I actually had to step back because he was getting close to me. So I stepped back once, and he stepped forward again into my personal space. And I thought to myself, I may have to shoot this guy, you know, and I was fully prepared if he was going to come at me again, that I was going to have to just shoot him through my coat pocket. And at that point, my neighbor showed up, and I showed him the butt of my gun in my pocket to let him know that this is that kind of situation, you know. And he flashed me his .45 behind the truck door. And so he takes the guys, and he takes them out the road. And so I'm waiting for him to come back through so I can see him, so that I know that they're gone and everything's good. And it's quite a long time before I see him. Finally, I see his truck. He pulls into my driveway, and he says, if those guys come back, he said, call the cops. He said, there's something really wrong with what's going on with them. He said, as soon as he got there, they ran down over the hill where they said they had thrown a chain. He said, but he believed they had maybe thrown their drugs down. And they appeared to me to be like nervous and sort of probably on some drugs or something like that. And but he did say he jerked the shit out of their car getting them out of there. And so that was a situation, a real life situation where I felt like my life might be threatened. And just having a firearm on myself made me feel much more comfortable than I would have just felt absolutely helpless in a situation like that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, April, and for sharing with us. And we'll be back to visit you again. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You're recording. Okay.
So a few more points that I would like to make, just my personal preferences and things that I've kind of learned along the way. One of the really important things is situational awareness, is to be aware of your surroundings and the people around you. There's some few small things that you can do to help yourself out. For instance, if you're leaving the gym and you've got your headphones in, you take those out. Don't walk around with your headphones in. You can't hear what's going on around you. Ponytails, I know a lot of people like to wear them, but they make a really good thing to grab onto. So somebody grabs you by your ponytail, they've got a pretty good leverage on you. Also, if you're in a bar or a restaurant, I like to sit with my back to the wall and facing the door so you can see who enters. Personally, myself, I do not like to open carry. I feel like, if someone were to start shooting or whatnot, you would probably be one of the first people they would want to take out because they can see that you're carrying a firearm. And also, you lose the element of surprise. So I like to conceal carry just for the surprise factor and that I don't want to try to make myself a target. Another thing is, I don't know why women's rights groups don't advocate for women's right to carry. It's absolutely your best defense, and it makes you equal to the biggest and baddest man out there. And I like to say, God created men and women, but Sam Colt made them equal.
All right. Thank you so much, April.
Thank you.
We'll be back with April later on. Thanks again.
Yeah, I don't know why people would.
Hello, everyone. This is Victoria Boven discussing our program Mind Strength. In this interview, we are facing fears in self-protection, and we are speaking of the enlightenment that comes in strengthening our minds as we learn these skills. Learning to face fears of protecting in every possible avenue, using every possible tool, eventually will develop higher self-esteem in that we come to realize how we avoided using our own space in the world before by stepping out of the way and backward, instead of moving in confidence that we could protect ourselves if need be. Our favorite statement in presenting this process is the fears we don't face become our limits. We will open this discussion with dignity to listen to our personal concerns in possible dangerous situations. We ask questions to special advisors that will improve, strengthen, and internalize our reactions in these circumstances. When I have asked many women what they would do to protect themselves in a crisis, the answer has frequently been nothing more than run or hide. So the importance of learning protection for oneself and their children is so obviously evident. I have asked what the initial thoughts would be when thinking about how they would handle themselves in a crisis, and I am told repeatedly, freezing in fear. Yes, they are afraid to protect themselves, and they are afraid of learning and using every type of protection available, including guns. This is a call for education that needs to be addressed in order for people in our country to evolve and develop our minds with more security and strength. And I believe we can, as many others have. Self-esteem rises immediately when a person feels that they no longer have to stand there defenseless. So preparation of facing fears of protecting before learning how to use every instrument available is necessary. We need to believe we deserve to protect ourselves with confidence first.